Hi there, this is Erik Egelko, and I am super excited to present episode number 8 of the Easy Deals podcast. All right, welcome back. Well, this week I am incredibly excited to have Kenneth Herskind, Vice President with Gun Commercial Real Estate, one of San Diego's leading multifamily brokerage firms. Ken, welcome to the studio.
Thanks for having me.
So Ken has a very fascinating background that ultimately led to being an owner of a commercial brokerage company here in San Diego. Before we dive into that, you have a really compelling story with international business and traveling back and forth from here to Japan. For the listeners who don't know you, just give us kind of a basic synopsis of how all of that led you to where you are now.
Yeah, well, you have to turn back the clock. So I graduated college in '91, and that was a time before the internet even existed in reality. So studied international business in college and also was an exchange student in Japan at that time. So Japan's economy was doing quite well, and it was more or less common sense to take a look at something like that, and it really piqued my interest. And it also pulled the entrepreneurial side of me out a little bit in terms of just putting yourself out there. So that was in me at that time. But I wanted to also get some good work experience. And I just went out there and had a friend, stayed with them, and had a few job interviews and landed a job in actually Nagoya, Japan was my first job.
Oh, and where geographically in Japan is that?
It's very center of Japan, right between Tokyo and Osaka. Very center of Japan.
Before we dive into the different businesses that you were involved with, culturally speaking, in the business community, what would you say are some of the biggest differences between, American business and doing business in Japan?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think generally workers in Japan really appreciate and respect the fact that they're employed. They care deeply about their work and the results of their work. They're still human beings. They're not robots. But yeah, I think that's a big difference. And I can actually give one example of this real quick. So I worked in the export department of a Japanese company for 3 years. And about 2 years into it, I noticed that my boss never took a personal holiday. It was very strange to me. He took the national holidays off. So eventually I asked him, Mr. Ishihara, why don't you take any vacations, basically? And he looked at me, and I'll never forget. He said, it's my gift to the company. To this day, I remember him saying that. And it spoke a lot about his attitude towards working and his dedication to the success of the company.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's a pretty stark contrast from the current job environment here in America, where you can't even get people to come into the office and work-life balance and culture, and you got to have yoga classes and snacks, and I imagine it's sort of refreshing to be around people who have a much stronger work ethic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we have our slow quitting culture and everything else. Yeah, it's very different.
And so you were in the telecommunications space. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, yeah, that particular company made intercom systems basically for commercial and residential applications. So when you go to the front door, push a button basically, and you can communicate with who's inside. It was a pretty basic system, audio and video both. And I was helping them export to North America. That was my job. But after that, I had a second gig in Japan later on where I was in a wireless testing company. We were testing 3G networks in Tokyo. Much smaller company, startup company, but it was still in Japan. I was there 2 or 3 years. That was my second stint.
And after working as an employee for these 2 other companies, you eventually went on to start your own business. What was the nature of that business?
Well, actually, next step after that, a friend of mine had a software company here in San Diego, a small company again, and asked me to join. And I visited San Diego for the first time in I was hooked. It was the best place. So I did that for a while, helped a small company out. We were doing Japanese translation software at the time. And worked really hard for 3 or 4 years and got very lucky, frankly speaking. And we were successfully acquired back in the day for $1 million.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really neat, actually. I was in my late 20s at that time.
Yeah, I would say I had sort of a similar story of spontaneously falling in love with San Diego. I was living in San Francisco at the time, and I came here for a New Year's Eve party. And a friend of mine who I grew up with was living down here, and the weather was great, and he had this great apartment, and there was a pool, and there were girls, and I asked, "What do you pay for this?" And he was paying the same for his apartment that I was paying to rent a room in San Francisco, and it's sort of 1 month later, I moved down here, and I have no plan of leaving since I got here.
Don't.
No, it's. I mean, before I lived in San Diego, when I was in college, we would have this thing. How do you know someone's from San Diego? They'll mention it all the time, and it's. I would say that people have a lot of confidence about being from San Diego, but it's. I mean, they back it up. I really think it is America's finest city. Anyway, so you were successfully acquired in this small startup company, and then what was next for your career after that?
Yeah, so after that, I got out of the entrepreneurial route a little bit, and I ping-ponged back into the corporate world. I worked for the company that bought us out for a while. It was a NASDAQ 1000 company. It was okay, another thing to do for a few more years, and quickly realized that wasn't my calling again. So after that, did 1 or 2 more entrepreneurial things, a little bit of real estate development too in Arizona. And unfortunately at that time, that's where we had the last market crash. That was like 08, 09
Gotcha.
kind of situation. And I remembered San Diego, came back to San Diego, and the real estate entrepreneurial thing is still in me. So that's actually where I initially joined Acre, which is another multifamily brokerage in town. Worked with them for a few years.
So I mean, you did have some entrepreneurial experience. However, I would say brokerage is kind of different than any other business. What did that transition look like, going from kind of this very structured corporate role to the sort of wild, wild west that is real estate brokerage?
Yeah, this is very different. That's a very good point, because I have really a strong background in sales and business development, in startup companies, in large corporations, and real estate still kicked my butt. It was rough. It's hard to prepare people to fully understand how deep this business is. Yeah, and that was around my early 40s. So it was also kind of the midpoint in my life, which is also different. I think younger people have the energy and the kind of the time and lack of distractions where it's somewhat easier on them. But I made it through.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up, because we've hired 4 new agents at my company, and they're pretty much all exclusively in their earlier mid-20s, and they face adversity in the sense that people don't take them seriously, and that when you're talking to property owners, it's that they're unsure about trusting someone who's so young with their assets. But what I tell these guys is it's actually very much to your advantage to be so young, because your life is very simple. You don't have a wife and a kids and mortgage and all these kind of obligations. So I wouldn't say that you were late to the game, but older than many people who get started in this kind of role. What sort of unique challenges did you face?
Yeah, I think part of it's a bandwidth challenge, no matter where you are in life. And the other responsibilities you have, by definition, takes away. So the younger guys or gals, they have that advantage, that they can really focus in, they have more time, more bandwidth. The older you get in life, you have a kid, you have this and that, wife, etc., mortgage payment. It's more challenging from that perspective. But the other side of the coin, I also think you have more life experience. You know what it really means to grind and work hard. So it's a plus and a minus, depending where you are.
So in the the first gang started in brokerage, I think back to the first few years in my career, and it's like you're just running around kind of like a maniac, spinning your wheels, not really knowing what is productive and what is a waste of time. You have any anecdotes you can share from those early years of starting as an agent?
Well, even regardless of if you're an agent or not, I think whenever you start something new, having a mentor or mentors is incredibly important. So first, you have to find the mentor or mentors. Second, you have to listen to them. So I think in our industry, getting back to your point, sadly, a lot of these brokers are supposed to be this mentor, and most of them ultimately aren't or don't function that way fully. And for various reasons. But they usually don't. And I think that hurts a lot of young agents. They're expecting that brokers that have been in the business 10, 15, 20 years to be that mentor for them. And sometimes yes, but mostly no has been my observation.
Yeah, I would happen to agree that there was an expression that I learned maybe in the second or third year of my career, that the older brokers eat the young. That basically they bring in young guys and give them kind of like a very unsustainable schedule of prospecting, and that the senior broker kind of just sits back and does nothing. And then when the deal is coming to fruition, they slide in and say, I need 50% of that, which is unfortunate. The mentors that have been the most influential and of the biggest impact to you, what did they do differently that made it have such a positive effect?
In life in general, was a venture capitalist that worked with me on my software startup company early on. And I wish I would have had more interaction with him, frankly, but his time was very valuable. And he mentored us, and the time I had with him, I really appreciated. And there's advice, one-liners, all kinds of stuff is still in my mind. I remember from just working with him briefly. I would say in this industry, I wouldn't point out, or I wouldn't, or I can't think of any particular individual that I think is a shining star. And I'm not here to beat up on anybody either. But your question was like who really sticks out, right? Is a great mentor. And I can't think of anybody in the industry that does. I'm not saying everybody's bad either. But yeah, sometimes the mentors in life could be outside the industry as well, potentially.
So circling back to breaking into the multifamily brokerage space, your first deal, what did that look like?
It's like most young agents, you're just cold calling a lot. You're about 6 months into it if you're lucky, and somebody's going to give you a chance. And basically, it was on Loretta Street near USD. I think it was a 4-6 unit deal. This was years ago. And my broker at the time, definitely helped me, and I think that's usually the case. Most of the models are set up this way. Otherwise, probably, you're too young and experienced to take it down on your own. So yeah, it was pretty straightforward, if I remember correctly. It wasn't particularly painful transaction. I've had a bunch of those since. So maybe I got kind of lucky. But, I tell everybody this. I worked really, really hard my first year for multiple reasons. And I made like $24,000. And it was rough. It was really rough.
Yeah, no, that's funny that you mentioned that. Yeah, I think back to my first year in the business. I think like my take home after all the splits, I made around like $7,000 or something.
Wow,
and I
that's
think
even worse.
Even worse. And I think I wrote like 75 or 80 offers. Like it was not a lack of effort, but it's just in the beginning, you don't know what you don't know, and you're competing against people who have decade-long relationships with a bunch of property owners. 6 units near USD. You remember what you sold this for?
It had a 2 on it. I think it was low 2s. It's just many years ago, frankly.
Yeah, no, it's funny looking back at some of these old deals that there's opportunities that I could have bought in like 2017, 2018, that at the time I'm like, oh, this is just too high. It's not going to pencil. And literally all of these deals made money. So
if I could jump in there real quick. So I think it was my second deal. The buyer was one of the most successful multifamily investors I know in San Diego. She probably has a current portfolio over $100 million. And she said to me, Ken, every time I buy one of these things, I think I'm overpaying, but then I look back and realize I didn't. And I think that's the issue, is a lot of buyers just talk themselves out of deals sometimes. But if you look at the data over the long term, it really truly is in San Diego buy and hold. Now there's pluses and minuses along the way, but.
Yeah, I think as long as there's a housing shortage, there is going to continue to be appreciation in both rents and property values. Really the only time I've seen people go wrong is if they finance it incorrectly, that if you get short-term debt that gives you like no margin for error in your business plan, that's how you get in trouble. Something that my dad would always say to me, he had 40 years in the real estate business, is holding power is everything. And that if you have unlimited holding power on a deal, that you'll never lose money.
Just don't over leverage.
Yeah, and just be conservative, and you don't have to do every deal. A lot of us are like deal junkies, and we love to transact, but it's sometimes the best deal is the one that you don't do. So getting past these first few years, what do you feel like was like the big inflection point in your brokerage career?
It's a great question. I think just getting through the first year, because in your first year, everything is so hypothetical. It just seems unreal. You see these people around you getting listings and cashing these big checks, and you're 6 or 8 months into it, and you just got, $5,000 or $10,000 check or something. And I think that's it. And I think once the second year typically comes along, all those seeds you planted come to fruition. I had a fantastic second year, but you don't know that in the middle of your first.
Yeah, and sometimes it's like the seed is germinating below the soil and you can't see it, kind of thing. I am, motivating these guys who work for it, and I explain to them that, I have a listing coming up right now on a strip shopping mall, and it is like a 6 to 7 year relationship to get that kind of listing. In terms of making your first big check that really made you feel like, on top of the world, what was that deal?
Yeah, that came in my second year for sure. I had an apartment listing, La Mesa. And so in the apartment world, we're really focused on listings or sellers, basically. We were trained that way, and I remain focused in that. So anyways, so I had the listing, and my broker came to me and wanted it, which is fine. Him and a small group were the best buyers, ended up getting it, and he sweetened the pot and said, basically, there's no cut with the house. You can just have it. And that was very memorable, very large paycheck for me.
If you don't mind sharing, how much was that?
It was right around $98,000 or $100,000. It was, to me, at the time, that was a lot of money.
Yeah, no, I remember when I cashed my first big check, it kind of makes you rethink your entire business plan, just because the amount of effort that goes into a small transaction versus a big transaction. Perhaps the big one is a little bit more work, but it's like exponentially of a bigger payday. So once you were able to sort of bank a 6-figure check, how did your business perspective change?
Well, in previous lives, I've done fairly well. A few things I've done. Not saying that $100,000 was still a big impact. It was, but in terms of my focus, I really didn't change much, to be frank about it. It was, I think it was a 20-unit property. For my career, that was pretty big property to trade, and I've always, even since then, I've really focused on a little bit more on velocity than size, because especially where we are in multifamily, the amount of maybe 20 to 60 units properties that trade every year, the quantity of those is fairly low, and the competition is still pretty fierce. So even to this day, I'm more in even the 2 to 20 unit space. That's kind of where I've just settled, and I'm fine with it. A $1 to $3 million listing is fine, and you get enough of those, you make real money.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up, Ken, because I sort of went on a tear through COVID selling these giant shopping malls. I had like multiple deals over 10 million in a year, which it was great, and I made some good checks. But what I realized is that the most lucrative opportunities actually are in these mid-sized deals that you mentioned, just because once you get over a certain threshold, the fees get compressed a ton, and you're dealing with people who are like at a level of sophistication that the broker's role is minimized. Whereas if you're dealing with more mom and pop type investors, you add way more value, and you can justify juicier fees. Looking back at your called the first half of your career, what do you think are some of the miscalculations you made?
I definitely miscalculated the amount of effort is required. I've been through some entrepreneurial things, but this is even another level. Being in this type of industry is more like, you're in Silicon Valley and somebody just gave you a $5 million check for your A round. It's those kind of people, they don't sleep. If somebody just handed you $5 million to start up your, whatever company you're dreaming of, your AI startup or whatever it is these days, that group of guys, they just go balls to the wall. I mean, they really do. And I've had some exposure to that, but not to that extreme level that I think exists in like Silicon Valley. But I think for people that really want to be successful in this business, you have to take that approach, that mentality, and you have to be able to sustain that long enough. Not a week or a month. You're talking about like at least a couple of years of really, really going hard.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd say it's like a lifestyle choice to pursue something like this, because it's, to casually be a real estate agent, you're never going to connect the dots in terms of having, a high velocity of deals, as you mentioned. I tell people who want to get into this, that's like you basically need to be like a sociopath for the first 6 months, and that it's like if you can be completely obsessed and not only working hard but improving every single day, that the effort that you apply in those first 6 months will dictate the next 5 years of your career. What do you think are the things that you did right to sort of break through and make it as a broker?
Well, in my particular case, I was forced to do things right, if that makes sense. I didn't have a lot of day-to-day support in my environment, which was okay for me. I was okay with it. It's not a criticism, but it forced me to build my own database. It forced me to, make my scripts better, for example, increase my volume of calls, increase, when I get somebody on the phone, have a better quality conversation. I just learned this all on my own, really. And I think that, like everything, it's hard initially, but in the long term, it was good for me. And it's paying dividends today being a broker in my own company, because I know now what not to do and what to do. That makes sense.
So you experienced a lot of success working for someone else, and then eventually, as many people do, you came to the conclusion that I should set this up for myself. What was sort of the thought process leading into deciding to make that jump?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it wasn't as many issues with the previous brokerage, really. I got along fine with my broker, no problems at all. It was more of a strategic issue where I wanted to go with my life more than anything, and autonomy, and wanting to do things and go in directions that I couldn't where I was. One example right now here at Gun CRE, we just launched our own property management side of our business, which I know you do as well. I couldn't have done that at the previous brokerage. I don't think it would have been possible. That's just one example.
So, fun anecdote about Ken and I is that we both actually have business partners named Max. Tell me about your relationship with Max, sort of how it started and what it's evolved into.
Well, we met at the previous brokerage. He was an agent there too, and I was observing a lot of what he was doing and what he was attempting to doing. Sorry, take that back. What he was attempting to do. And I kind of saw him hitting his head a little bit and not kind of able to move forward with some strategic ideas he had too. And frankly, it just became apparent, like we had similar ideas about where we wanted to take our careers, and we weren't able to do that where we were. And it just aligned. It's like, yeah, if we can't do what we want to do here, then go do it on our own.
So I have found that business partnerships are very tricky, and that there is a personal component to being in a business relationship long term with someone, and that you really need to be a perfect fit personality wise, and that you can't sort of have two people who are trying to drive the car sort of thing. What would you say is kind of the delineation of duties in your company with you and Max?
It took a while to form. But luckily, Max and I are completely different people in many ways, personality, skill sets, what have you. And in the beginning, there was some friction because of that. But ultimately, I believe it is a plus because I'm able to focus on the things I do well, and he focuses on the things he does well, which are very different, and together it complements. So, for example, I don't need two of me's. It's duplicate, right?
So in terms of like the day to day, what are the different tasks that you're each focusing on?
Well, so for example, he's much more of a numbers guy. So he's really great in Excel, and he's great, watching our books and stuff like that. Helping with taxes and all these things you have to do to run a company. I tend to focus more on recruiting, helping agents, branding issues. So those are more the functional issues of running a company.
It's an interesting coincidence because in my company, my Max, I would say it's a similar setup that he's incredibly detail oriented. We'll be reconciling bills, and he's like down to the penny with everything we're doing, whereas I'm much more of like the vision and the strategy and the motivational pep talks and the closing of the deals. Top Gun. Tell me about the company name and sort of how you guys came up with this brand.
Top Gun CRE. So it's a bit of a long story, so bear with me. So ultimately, when we decided we wanted to have a company, right away we knew it wouldn't be Herskind and Delbecq.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, it's a mouthful. And when you're cold calling and trying to brand that, good luck. It's terrible. So we wanted to be memorable and unique. And just, this is a true story. Strangely, I happened to be watching the Top Gun movie one week, and Max did too. And then a couple of days later, we got together to talk about things. And I said to him, you know what? I think we should call our company Top Gun something. He said, you got to be kidding. I thought so too. We came to the same conclusion separately. It had to be. So then after that, once we knew a name or we had an idea of some names based on that theme, that resonates very well with San Diegans, of course. First expense we had was we hired an excellent logo branding guy that put together not just the logo, but more than that. And so we had a firm marketing and branding foundation to launch the company from.
That's super cool. No, I've always liked your guys' company name. I feel like many brokerage companies try to have this really sort of, menacing, Marcus and Millichap or these kind of names. And when we were picking the name for our company, Palm Tree Properties, it's light, it's optimistic, it's approachable. And I feel like Top Gun in a similar way is you're not taking yourself too seriously. And I appreciate that. moving into to forming the company, I found that I way underestimated what was involved in being a broker owner versus just being a top producing agent. The first, let's call it 6 to 12 months on your own, what did that look like for you guys?
Oh, it's the same. I mean, who's going to assemble the desk? Who's going to sign the office lease? I mean, it goes on and on and on and on and on. So yeah, it's a big hit. It's a big hit. And I think some of our competitors in this space too, I've noticed, have left some other brokerages, kind of started their own shops, which are fine. But you'll see their deal flow goes down too. You can't do everything. You just can't. You can't be everything. So you have to pick your battles. And I agree with you totally. It definitely takes a hit on your brokerage side of your business, launching a company. It just has to. But it was really, and I've started companies in the past. It wasn't the first time I've ever done this. And it still was really intense.
Yeah, no, I would agree that it's all of a sudden you go from just being super salesman to now I'm operations and I'm marketing and I'm accounting and I'm finance and I'm janitorial and I'm facilities and then I'm building furniture and I'm hanging paintings, and that you cherish those sales moments because you kind of yearn for that time where you were just a salesperson. In your business now, how much are you Ken the broker versus Ken the sales manager?
So I think I'm getting a little bit closer to 50-50 still. I mean, we've been in business 6 years now. It's still a tremendous amount of my time. But I'm okay with that though. I really want to be a broker and I really want to be a business owner. I want to be both. And I'm okay with the trade-offs from both.
So I initially put my eyes on Ken as a guest because he has done a really great job with recruiting. I see you on LinkedIn all the time and that you're doing these summer boot camps and you're taking on interns. What have you found to be your most effective recruiting strategies for bringing agents into the company?
Yeah, Max and I have tried everything over the years. Recently, we've done a better job. But it's like everything in life, you just got to gut your way through it. We tried reaching out to community colleges or, trying to get involved in some of the real estate society things, et cetera. And it's just marginal, in my opinion. We tried advertising a little bit. It's marginal. Really social media. And I know you spend a lot of time on LinkedIn too. I think that's the best, most efficient use of your time because it's just so laser focused. It's like everything else in life. It's so easy to spin your wheels on relatively unproductive efforts.
Yeah, no, I agree. We're more in our infancy than your firm is. But yeah, there are so many things that occupy your time and only a few of them are productive. In terms of bringing on new agents, what do you look for?
Yeah, I stress this one word, entrepreneurial. That's it. I don't care if you just got out of high school or if you got an MBA from USC. I personally don't care. This business is not academically challenging. There's some things you have to learn, and you have to be proficient in certain things for sure. That all can be taught with anybody that wants to apply themselves. It's the mindset. It's the work ethic. That's 80% of it.
What have you noticed in the folks who have found success in your company to be kind of like the early symptoms of someone who gets it and who's going to make it?
Really simple. I tell you once, you just do it. That's it. Don't have to tell you twice.
Yeah, I would agree. I have an expression that I use in my office all the time that I don't care if people make mistakes. It's completely reasonable for someone to make mistakes. I just don't want you to make the same mistake twice. Because if I have to be constantly reminding you of something, that is not a productive use of my time. Mm-hmm. On the flip side of things, the people who have not made it or were just not like a good culture fit for the company, how would you describe those people?
Basically, they're people that want the upside of what we do, but don't want to put forth either the effort or they think it's like a W-2 job where you're really working for someone else, but you're working for yourself ultimately. You're not working for Ken or Eric, you're not working for any of us. You're really still working for yourself. And it's hard to make that switch in their minds because society in general has programmed them to be kind of a cog in a wheel. You know, you put in your time, every 2 weeks somebody gives you a paycheck. That's what they're exposed to. That's what they know. So to undo that is a challenge.
Have you found that younger people or the current generation of younger people getting into the business have been their expectations are all screwed up because of Instagram and all of the sort of braggadocious behavior that you see on social media?
Maybe. I mean, I think social media on a very high level teaching young people to basically covet things a lot. Because you really look at what they're interested in watching. It's people that get paid to go on vacation, basically. And everybody wants that, but the odds of it happening to you is about zero to make it a real career. And they don't understand all those things. So, you know, I want nice things too. We all do. It's fine. But the odds of it happening to you and or the effort required to achieve those things is really misunderstood.
Yeah, I have found that it's a matter of what is your motivation. I think that people getting started, they're kind of doing it for the glory of it, to say that I'm this big success and that I made all this money, when it's really, we're only doing it for the money. And that the money buys freedom and the money buys nice time and you know, pleasant experiences, but to do it for external validation is you're like putting yourself on this emotional roller coaster. Whereas if I don't care at all how many people are excited that I closed this deal, I'm happy that I closed the deal. That it's like a much better mentality.
That's a really good point. I didn't think about that as much. It's the external praise maybe some of them are looking for. I personally don't care. I could care less if the world hates me or loves me or whatever.
I remember it really hit me hard maybe 2 or 3 years into the business. The San Diego Association of Realtors hosts this event called the Circle of Excellence. And I had seen pictures and videos from previous years, and I'm like, wow, you know, these people are so impressive, blah, blah, blah. And then you go to the event, and it's this entirely manufactured thing for social media that they announce the rookie of the year, and there's like 10 to 20 rookies of the year. And each of them has this film reel as if they're the only one. And the, you know, to be in the top, you know, how is it every real estate agent is in the top 1%?
It just can't be. Yeah.
So I know that you also are a real estate investor. Tell me about the deals that you're buying and you know, what your portfolio looks like nowadays.
So, you know, we're focused kind of like what we're doing as a broker too, right? Smaller properties. We're looking to buy, like a lot of investors these days, frankly, you know, value add deals. You can throw some ADUs in the property. We've got a project right now in University Heights. We're probably going to add some ADUs next year, depending on interest rates, et cetera. And we're looking to syndicate deals too, like a lot of people, you know, to take down deals, it's a lot of money. And that's the first point. The second point, the reason why I really like to syndicate deals is it spreads risk around as well. You got to be careful who you do this with, like going into business with anybody. That's the downside of it all. But if you pick the right group to go into business with, you also, or to invest with, you also get the expertise and different viewpoints of what can we do, you know, how can we add value. Maybe somebody has more of a development background. Maybe somebody has more of a, you know, how do we raise a little bit more money for this project? So I think it's like, I like building businesses. So to answer your question, I'm not just trying to be a lone wolf and just running out there and buy deals on my own.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that sentiment. So about half of my portfolio I own with my business partner, Max, and we have made very good investment partners because we have totally different skill sets. Is that he is very good at the analysis part of it and about, I guess I'd call it like risk mitigation. I can oftentimes be very optimistic about the outcomes, and that he tempers me down, whereas I am the dude who can go knock down the deal and figure out the financing, and if a tenant is being unruly, I'm the sheriff and I put them in check, and I think I could do this all by myself, but I feel like it's, if you find the right partner, it's like a 1 + 1 = 3 situation. And it's ultimately, all this stuff we're doing makes a lot of money. So if you're going to make money, no matter what, do it with people you like to do it with. It just makes for like a more pleasant experience. So last time I had seen you and Max, you were telling me a bit more about this University Heights deal that you have. If you don't mind, sort of break down the background of, what it is and,
Sure.
how you found it and how you bought it.
Well, it's the second major reason why we're multifamily brokers, because you uncover deals. Every buyer out there wants a deal, right, by definition. And I think that's a huge advantage of what we do. So in this particular case, it was actually my own listing. A year and a half ago, the market was really rough. And my client had a couple offers. None of them really matched his timeline or price. And being the listing agent, frankly speaking, I become really familiar with the property. And I was frustrated, actually, because I knew it had potential. And I think there's just too much fear in the air at that time, even maybe today, a little too much in my opinion. But regardless, I just went in my office one day after I think my second escrow fell apart. And I talked to my partner, Max. I said, Max, we should buy this deal. I mean, and he was quite skeptical at the time. And then we crunched the numbers, we talked to my client, and we were able to basically put together, because we knew the situation so well, that really helped. So talking to my own client, we were able to put together a really long escrow that matched his needs as well, made sure he had a smooth transition over to a new personal residence he was trying to buy, and able to get rid of, or evict, I should say is a better way of putting it, the current tenants. So by the time we got possession, it was vacant, which is critical in situations like this. And then we were able to quickly renovate and get the property performing.
And in terms of putting the capital and the debt together, what did that look like?
Well, some of it came from us, of course. To Max's credit, he's got some really great financing connections. So we were able to put together some financing. We also brought in a few other small investors to go with us too, to make sure that we weren't over leveraged. We discussed this earlier. And then the other advantage of this too is, as we go about to build the ADUs, again, we have the right group around us to put in the additional capital necessary. We're also hoping at the back end of all this, we'll have lower interest rates and be able to refinance the whole deal. It should cash flow quite nice.
Do you see this one being a long-term hold?
I personally do. The investors I interact with, the most successful, basically never sell. But things happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I'm of a similar sentiment that it's if you buy it right and it's in a good location, it's hard to replace it with a superior deal. University Heights, this is like an incredibly desirable neighborhood. In terms of the management of the asset and renting it, are you guys seeing like a just huge appreciation in rent and like a bonanza of tenants applying? What has that part of it been like?
Well, because it's a good location, it did take us a little longer than we expected to get some tenants in there. But when you're in more of a premium market, the tenants tend to be easier to manage and stick around. We don't get I don't think we've had a vacancy. I mean, they just stay. So, and we also have property management arm of our business now. So it's easy for me personally. It's just part of our portfolio of properties we manage.
Yeah, you and I have very similar businesses in that we own both brokerage and management companies, and that I feel like creates like a platform to be the best investor that you can be, because everything is part of your day-to-day business anyways. Whereas, I have clients who are attorneys and doctors and these kind of things, and you have a maintenance issue that comes up that requires owner approval. All of a sudden it's taking away from their day, whereas I'm intimately involved in the day-to-day anyway, so it really doesn't bother me much. In terms of future investing, what are you guys looking to do?
Probably just more of this kind of stuff. I'd rather just continually pick up smaller properties. I think it's a diversification issue. Like even if I had $10 million to go invest tomorrow, I wouldn't buy a $20 million apartment property probably. It's just, I like diversification. I've learned this in life. I like various income streams. I like various efforts. I think it provides more insulation from the world around you. And there's negative aspects to what I just said too, but I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's 20 years from now, you will probably not say to yourself, oh, I was too risk adverse. I have found that being a little bit more on the conservative side is better suited for real estate investing, perhaps for, venture capital or, securities, these kind of things. You have to be super ambitious. But something that Max and I say constantly is it's all defense. Is that if you prepare for the worst case scenario, then there's only upside in the deal. So on this one, you mentioned that you had a very long escrow. Which is really interesting to me because I have found that there are a lot of non-monetary components of a deal that can make it way more lucrative, and that if you have all of this breathing room to sort of figure everything out, you can afford to pay more to take on more expensive debt because you have much more breathing room to figure the deal out. In that time period, what were like the big projects you were working on in terms of the property?
Well, from our perspective as the buyers, we really wanted to have the tenants leave. That was a big issue because the property needed to be improved. And most of the work we did on the property was internal, not external, inside the units. So there was one tenant took a little bit longer than we anticipated to have them vacate. It was actually a condition of close of escrow, which the seller was fine with. He had a in this particular instance, he had great relationships because he lived on site and he really knew the tenants, of course. So that's another advantage of kind of these smaller situations. It's just, I think this interpersonal relationship comes into play more and it provides more flexibility than larger, transactions. And again, in this particular case, the seller wanted more time to find a place where he wanted to personally move to, and it just worked out for him too. So it was fine. These are the kind of successful deals it's a cliche, they're win-win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that because I think that there are people who kind of their entire business model is based on bamboozling one of the parties in the deal, which unfortunately it does work. That can be a lucrative strategy, but you're really... you have no social equity when you behave like that. Whereas if everyone wins, then they speak highly of you. It's easy to get deals in the future. Speaking of reputation, what do you think are mistakes that you've seen other people in our business make in terms of not having a sterling reputation?
Yeah, I think it's just this industry is really cutthroat, frankly. I get it. There's $50,000, $100,000 paychecks on the line. I understand. And situations usually aren't a problem until they become a problem. But if they become a problem, you've got a real mess on your hands. And I've learned in life, I'd just rather not have problems. I don't know, maybe oversimplified to answer your question that way. But some of these more aggressive agents out there, really short-term orientated, and I think there's gray areas, and then they cross into you just shouldn't go there areas, and get away with it sometimes. And ultimately, all you have to do is go back to your fiduciary duty. As an agent, you're supposed to uphold various things, and if you ever question it, you just go reread that. What does fiduciary duty mean? And then you'll be reminded.
In terms of deals that were messy, do you have a particular one that you can give us some insight on?
In terms of crossing like fiduciary boundary,
or
you
just
mean, or
challenging deals,
challenging
difficult buyers, sellers, properties.
Yeah, God, there's a lot, and most of these situations come down to not the property; it's the individuals involved in the transaction. Has been my experience. I know some brokers, for example, that maybe there's a non-conforming unit, and that came back to bite them or something later on. But a lot of the challenges I've had is more getting it over the finish line with the individuals. Again, because I tend to operate in a space where maybe they're a little bit less sophisticated than a lot of the transactions I think you've done. And it's not quite as emotional as selling a home in the pure residential world, but it's kind of a hybrid. There's still a lot of emotions involved. And when you get some buyers or sellers that aren't quite as sophisticated, the teaching component or the guidance component is a heavier lift. And I'm trying to think of a particular example that comes to mind. I do know, I'll give you one example of a situation where they didn't become a client, but we're proposing a listing in Pacific Beach. And I know this has happened to many other brokers, but basically, we're the apartment experts, right? And I thought we were pretty close to getting a very nice listing, about a $5 million listing in PB, long-term owner, and wanted to sell. And this is a true story. The wife actually bumped into a real estate agent in a supermarket shopping cart, kind of bumped into her car, basically. And they got to know each other. This lady just arrived from the East Coast, just got a real estate license. Never actually even transacted anything here, and sold some homes in the East Coast. And they just got along personally from that, literally bumping into each other in a parking lot, and ultimately listed with this lady that just arrived and got her license. And we tried warning the husband, said, look, there's a lot of issues here, experience, et cetera. And they wouldn't hear it. And ultimately they left about $400,000 on the table, clearly. And they ended up in a lawsuit afterwards because that inexperienced agent made apparently some pretty bad mistakes in escrow.
Yeah, I've seen sort of this same format play out many times before, where it's real estate agents, I would say, are confident to a fault. And that being that's an impacted industry, everyone is trying to get every deal all the time. So I'll see people who will list with some very confident residential agents who don't know what pro forma means, or don't understand that your cap rate is off your net income, not your gross income. And that what I tell people when I meet with them is that this is the most valuable asset you have. Are you going to risk $5 million based on this person's confident attitude? So that's, that was a great anecdote. Thank you for sharing. Something that comes up in pretty much every transaction, commercial real estate transaction, I have found, is that at some point the buyer is going to become very discontent with the deal and threaten to cancel and insist on some kind of accommodation to keep them in the deal. What are your strategies for managing your seller, or managing the buyer and the seller when these things happen?
Well, again, we're focused a little bit more on the listing or the sell side in our business. Not that we don't represent buyers, we do, but I would say the majority we represent sellers. So from that perspective, it's all about leverage, in my opinion. So if you keep other buyers close, and you have multiple buyers, it diminishes the ability for the buyer in escrow to basically try to retrade the property or what have you. With that said, if the buyer does find some legitimate issues with the property that were clearly unknown prior to entering escrow in the due diligence period, I'm really sympathetic in a sense. I understand, and I try to communicate that with the seller. XYZ was found or what have you, and there's a monetary issue and nobody knew about this. Perhaps the seller didn't even know. Maybe the sewer line was scoped and nobody knew the sewer line was being crushed. I'm not sure, for example. But you get in some circumstances where the buyer is just using that for an excuse because the ask is just crazy. It's like, it doesn't cost $500,000 to fix that sewer line. I'm exaggerating, but.
Yeah, no, I've run into similar situations, and it's not about any of the repairs most of the time, that these are just the mediums to please this person's ego and make them feel like a winner. Oftentimes what I've found to be very productive is that when I meet with the buyer pre-acceptance, is I do what I call putting the skeletons in the front yard, that I meet them at the property and I tell them everything that I know to be wrong with the property. I explain all of the reasons that they should not do this deal. And I make sure to do all of this prior to us accepting their offer, because everyone is so accommodating and enthusiastic at that point that they're much more receptive to receiving all this information. And so that way, once we get into the deal, I've basically disarmed them of any weapons they would have to make a complaint. And not that they won't. I mean,
they still do.
But again, it's more about them feeling like they have done their duty than actually having problems with the property. On the seller side of things, I work with many people who are older, and so it's I do a lot to set their expectations that this is going to happen, that we are going to get a buyer, they're going to ask for a discount, and that it is not a personal affront to you, and it really doesn't have anything to do with the property, that this is the nature of the business. And I have found that if you prep the seller way ahead of time, even before you put the property on the market, that this is coming, it makes the emotions be much more manageable in that situation. I have a listing that I'm about to put on the market here shortly for a retail strip mall off University Avenue near SDSU, and the owner was considering replacing the roof. The roof is not failing. The roof is decent. He's just like a landlord with a heart of gold kind of guy. And what I told him is, save the money you're going to spend on the roof, and in your head, earmark it for a potential credit for this buyer. Because even if you replace the roof, the buyer is going to ask for a discount. You could give someone a brand new construction building and they're still going to ask for a discount in escrow. And I have found that if you can really just set expectations ahead of time, it makes managing the emotions in that renegotiation process a lot smoother. So sort of winding down here in terms of your daily routine, what are kind of the habits that you have found that have made you successful?
The early bird gets the worm. That's a big one. I don't know why. I've just noticed it's not just with me, it's with other successful agents. It's really important. I wish I knew why, by the way. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, I would. So I recently have tried to get to the office really early. Usually I'm in between 7:30 and 7:45, whereas intentionally I tell everyone else not to get in until 9 o'clock, so that I have this insulated time to, sometimes I get a ton of work done. Sometimes I just sit and drink coffee for 30 minutes and don't talk to anyone. But I would agree with you that just starting early inherently, there's like less noise in the world. That, by 10 o'clock, your schedule is going to be totally screwed up because all kinds of new things have popped up, so that if you can reserve 1 to 2 hours at the beginning of the day to actually be focused, that makes a huge difference. The future of Top Gun, where do you guys see yourself 5 years from now?
Yeah, it's a great question. We don't have super ambition to have like 50 agents and, destroy all of our competitors or anything like that. I mean, we're not that ambitious, actually. The premise of the company and our current vision still is we just want a great group of people working around us that we like to work with. Of course, increase our deal flow. All brokerages feel this way. Increase our property management. Ideally, we'd like to get to maybe 800 doors in the next few years. And buy more deals. Just continue what we're doing, just to a larger degree, higher scale.
Your company culture, from what I can see from a distance, everyone really likes working there. What, as an owner, do you do to ensure that you have a good company culture?
We care. Really, we just care. A lot of brokers don't. We just care. You know, we want everybody to be successful. We really do, for many reasons. It's good. It's a good business policy to have. Mm-hmm. It's good for the business. It's good for the agents. And yeah, I think that's really important.
You know, something that I wouldn't say I'm struggling with, but it's like a new experience for me, is that not everyone is going to make it. People can have the best of intentions and you know, seem really good at the beginning, but inevitably it's a business where you know, 90% of people fail in the first 12 months. Tell me about kind of the emotional toll that takes as a broker owner, and how you've come to be more resilient.
Well, we're still human, you know. Yeah, I don't like it either, you know, especially when I see somebody that has potential and they just didn't give themselves enough runway, basically, was the bigger issue. And the other flip side of caring, by the way, is being really transparent and forthright to people that you really know likely won't make it, and perhaps just advise them as such. And if they don't take your advice, maybe just kindly say, well, I just don't think this is the best place for you to be. It's just not a match for your goals and your personality and everything else. And that's on our side as owners or managers or brokers. I think there's got to be more of, hey, you know, you've really got 90 days here to really basically prove yourself. And at the end of those 90 days, if this isn't right for you, it's actually better for you to move along and do something else. Because otherwise you'll waste another 6 months or 12 months. You'll come to the same conclusion.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, this has been great material, Ken. Before we wrap up, many of the people who watch these episodes are, you know, aspiring brokers and investors. For someone who is, you know, this is day one of their real estate journey, what advice would you give them?
Just really get your head around what it means to be an entrepreneur. Go study that. The internet's fantastic. You can find books on entrepreneurialism. You can find podcasts. You know, lots of entrepreneurs explain about their story. It doesn't even have to be a real estate agent, perhaps. It could just be anybody that's an entrepreneur, because then you really understand what this is about.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing all of these nuggets of wisdom. Anything else you'd like to mention before we sign off here?
Just getting back to your point about getting deals over the finish line. What I ultimately realized is, if a buyer wants to buy and a seller wants to sell, it'll close. It's not more complicated than that. You got to do a little tap dance, but if they really want to, they'll get the deal done.
Yeah, I've noticed that there's kind of an interesting turning point in every transaction where all of a sudden we're all on the same team. You know, is that we may have, you know, duked it out for the last 45 days, but for the next 10 days, we're just here to, you know, sign paperwork,
get it done.
And, you know, shake hands and get this thing done. So it's, I think that some amount of adversity, I kind of welcome it. Like it's exciting in a way, but, you know, eventually you don't get into a transaction to cancel. You get into it to close, hopefully, you know, if you have earnest intentions. Fantastic.
Thanks for having me.
Ken, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it and your time.
All right, guys. Well, that is a wrap of episode number 8 of the Easy Deals podcast. See you again next week.